Kinda sound, tuning in for change.
Welcome to KindaCreative. My name is Django. This show goes out on Kinda Sound Radio every Sunday at 2:30 South Africa time, 1:30 UK time. And we basically talk to creative individuals from various walks of life about their passions and productivity and how they generally get through their lives. My guest today is John Bartmann. He is the founder of Pravda, a South African band. It's been going since, I believe, 2009. And he is also currently scoring audio dramas, editing podcasts. He has a podcast called How I Make Music. He's got library sort of music coming out every month on his website, johnbartmann.com. You can also find him on Twitter. John is the music as his handle on there. Welcome, John.
Hello, Django. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know we can talk crap about all sorts of things for ages, so
that's what we do. And maybe I should just take this opportunity to publicly state my appreciation for your resonant, booming bass voice. As I've always said to you in private, now's my chance to actually say it personally. You have a fantastic voice for radio. I mean, like, you could talk about anything, and I'd be like, this guy's on it.
Well, cheers. Well, the question is what to talk about. That's always the dilemma, isn't it? The other morning on Kinda Sound, one of our hosts was late, and I ended up playing sort of, I wouldn't say ambient music, but very mellow music, and talking quite softly, and I just thought, wow, I'm really enjoying this.
The first thing that my mind goes to is ASMR on YouTube. The slightly creepy, some have called it, but it's very close mic recordings of interesting sounds. So often using these condenser microphones, which are binaural, so actually inside the ears of a model head, and rustling and whispering and tapping objects. I guess the rule there is just nothing loud, but it's hugely popular. And actually, in fact, I listen to it every morning when I do my coding work. If you ever want to pivot up, change careers, and you feel like taking the volume down, then I think you've got a career in ASMR, my friend.
Interesting. I should listen to some of that. I've heard about it, but I haven't heard anything that won me over. But I'm sure it's a whole rabbit hole.
Well, if you'd like, we can take a little quick shallow dive into it. My experience with it started about 4 years ago when I realized that I couldn't listen to music at work. I found it too distracting, and my brain goes off into that direction. And at the same time, I couldn't listen to podcasts at work. So there were these type of white noise apps, like Seaside Sounds, that kind of thing. But I found those could be a little bit, they're generative and they could be a bit repetitive. And I don't know how I've got onto it, but there was this thing, ASMR, which, if I remember correctly, stands for, drumroll, autonomous sensory meridian response. Okay, autonomous sensory meridian response, meaning it's the tingles. It's when you get a little shiver of pleasure from something that you've heard, or even a touch or something. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think I must not be the only one who enjoys it, because these things have got millions of plays on YouTube. And I find it quite peaceful, especially when there's no talking. I usually Google no talking when I'm looking for them, because I find the close-up brushing and tapping of glass and wooden objects quite soothing. And it can go on for hours and hours, and it kind of just goes into the background of your mind, helps you focus a little bit.
Interesting.
They put a lot of effort. Some of the top streamers, they put a lot of effort into how it looks. So there's obviously a lot of, women in makeup and guys with like great lighting and everything. But I generally don't really look at something unless I hear a sound, I'm like, oh, what is that? And then it turns out they've got like a little bubbly toy or something, a squishy bubbly toy. And they're like, check that out. ASMR if you're into new audio experiences, especially kind of peaceful ones.
Nice. Yeah, that's interesting because, I mean, talking about what you can and can't listen to while working, I mean, when I'm doing admin, I'll sometimes just listen to music. Do sort of tend to prefer, actually it depends. Sometimes I like more like upbeat electronic music, sort of if I'm looking for almost a caffeine boost in music form. And if sometimes it'll be more chilled stuff if I'm like anxious or whatever. Yesterday I had the displeasure of jackhammers going next door. And
is that jackhammers the construction equipment or the popular UK grime band?
Yeah, construction equipment. There seems to be a house next door being demolished. And between that and some tech trouble that I was having, I just decided to try and use this as an opportunity for personal growth, start my day in a more centering fashion and not just dive into my day and end up reacting to all these things that come flying at you because you aren't kind of grounded in your goals and your whatever you've manifested for your day, you know?
Absolutely.
So this morning was the first time I did, well, in years, a little meditation sort of a thing, breathing exercises, and I just sort of center myself, and then it led to a bit of stretching, and I felt a lot better going into my day than I did yesterday. So, and
I think the way you start your day has such an impact on the rest of it.
Huge.
It can a good start to a day can actually last for more than a day. You know, good start to a week can last for the whole week if you do it right.
So I wanted to ask you about that, actually, some of your sort of productivity hacks and just how you kind of motivate yourself as a freelance artist.
The short answer is routine. I've got almost a military routine in place that really keeps me grounded as someone who doesn't really know what to expect each new day. Opportunities can come at the last minute. They often do in freelance work. So I have a sort of a wake-up routine that lasts for about 30 minutes, which just involves sitting and coffee. And from then on, I do about an hour of music-related practice. It's usually the violin, might be guitar. But the point is to spend a good chunk of time without switching on the critical thinking mind. That only happens at 9 o'clock after I've done my morning sort of ablutions and clean the kitchen or whatever. But 9 o'clock is a hard limit. So by 9 o'clock, whether I've finished everything else or not, I'm sitting down in front of the computer. And at present, what I'm doing is two things. I'm a student of coding, so I'm on a software engineering course that's going to last until August this year. So that's taking up half of my life at the moment, half of my work life. So that goes until about 1 o'clock, at which point I do about an hour of exercise, come home, have some lunch, and then finish off the day with all of the other stuff combined, which is admin, creative, life stuff. And then usually about 6 o'clock I switch off, and then it's my family and, wife and stuff. Sometimes I'll do a bit of TV later. Sometimes I get sucked into doing music stuff later too, but I try not to do computer stuff too late. Rather sit on the floor with a guitar. 2 days ago, it was a recorder. I was running this recorder through a delay pedal.
Awesome.
Sitting on the floor. Yeah. Just having a musical experience which doesn't involve too much thinking. You see, a computer is actually a type of instrument. In fact, when I chatted to Brian Funk last week, he said at Berkeley, they're actually sort of starting to incorporate MIDI controllers as a type of instrument. To me, the definition of an instrument is something that requires way more muscle memory than critical thinking. In fact, to me, the journey, the goal of musical practice is to bypass the thinking mind. So what we're actually trying to do here is escape the decision-making process, or at least to automate it so that your muscles are doing it for you. Getting away from the screen and sitting on the floor and playing the recorder or whatever is a therapeutic practice for me. If I'm able to do that as often as possible, I'll take an instrument like this or a kalimba or a mbira, harmonica, small portable acoustic instruments that you can use to generate some tone and get into a rhythm, get into a space. And the natural byproduct of that is to it's your decision-making mind switches off and you start to like relax a bit, you know? That's part of the whole purpose for me. It's not really about being a fantastic recorder player. It's actually just about using this tool, as childish as it is, and as humbling as a lot of these activities are. You know, often, you whip out a recorder in the forest and you're sitting with other people your age, which is now, for me, 39. It's a joke, you know, and that's fine. People can have their laugh, but don't get between me and my therapy, you know. There's also that element to it. This is my therapy. It's a natural form of therapy. And I encourage people to do it, even if they're in, you know, the later stages of their lives, to really just kind of reconnect with that inner sense of play. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, my mother was likening, I asked her what she does when she hits a sort of creative block. She was on the show last week and she paints. And she was saying she often, she finds meditation. She meditates religiously every morning for, I think, 3 hours or 2.5 to 3 hours. And she was basically, when she was explaining the states of meditation, it reminded me of creativity. It reminded me of exactly those sorts of things where it's almost, you're in a state of flow and you're not like, you may look busy when you're creating, but you're not actually, internally you're quite sort of calm. And as you say, sort of decisions are making themselves. So it was quite interesting to sort of see how that sort of helps her get back into a creative state when she is working, even though when you're meditating, you're kind of not working. It's inner work, I guess. But it was interesting to me. I'd never thought about it that way. What time?
Yeah, no, totally.
Sorry.
What were you saying? What time?
I was just going to ask, because you mentioned your sort of hard limit when you start working is 9. What time do you usually get up?
7, maybe 6:30.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So a couple of hours to just sort of do other things and including practice violin.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Okay. You might consider it a type of life goal to be able to extend that morning session indefinitely. If I had the whole day, I would most likely be in that state of mind, that state of flow or play, for at least half of it, if not the whole day. The admin and the chore and the upskilling and all of that is just the necessary, conversation that you have to have with life in order to get by. But I suppose as I get older, as we get older, we should be looking more and more at like trying to play more and trying to be free more. And what often happens, I find, is like just viewing it from the outside. It appears that there's a weight on your shoulders as you get older, and as you kind of get more mature. This weight appears to get heavier and heavier, and your responsibilities appear to grow. This is just a fact of life, I don't have any kids, but I understand that is obviously a major responsibility. Medical stuff, all of this stuff seems to sort of weigh up and stack up. And so as a person who intends fully to not be burdened, progressively burdened until the end of your life, you really have to be conscious about taking that time and making it yours, and really like owning it, and not being afraid to be a beginner. This is the major stumbling block for people who haven't had a background in music, at least, or art, as your mother's background is, or whatever. The point is to have a practice that doesn't involve just putting food on the table. It doesn't matter how old you are. That is so important. A swim in the sea, some ritual. There's a reason that the word spiritual contains the word ritual in it. There is a ritual element that, when practiced, creates. This is your spiritual pursuit. It doesn't have to be sitting on the floor in the lotus position. It can just be something as simple as, it's doodling, on a piece of paper for 5 minutes a day. That is a spiritual practice,
And it's
so
playful.
I encourage. It's playful, yeah. It switches off your mind. It's childlike. It reconnects you with something other than this perceived burden. And I think that therefore these types of things are really noble, even though they're perceived as sort of at the bottom of the hierarchy of importance in society. When I'm in my clearest states of mind, I see that entire hierarchy is upside down. The goal of our lives shouldn't be to put food on the table. We're bigger than that. We're better than that. We should have more ambitious goals than simply making numbers go up.
Yeah.
There's more to it. There's more to be measured that isn't being measured. So yeah, that's my rant. But it's not just a rant, it's a practice.
Yeah.
And I don't regret a day of my life,
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm also realizing as some people are less creative, but they might play games or they might enjoy comedy, humor is an incredible laughter. It's such an incredible release from the sort of, taking you out of your mind. It's a big part of it is to not be thinking and stressing and, to take you out of that state. And when you come back from those states of joy or play, you often come back with new ideas. Things pop into your head that you wouldn't have thought of when you were sitting there stressing and, getting worked up about something. Often that little break is invaluable for the sort of insights you come back with.
Yeah, absolutely. The best ideas come on your morning walk. The Archimedes story, the way he came up with the Archimedes screw device when he was in the bath. This is when Einstein said the same thing, when you're on a mental break. Did you know that Einstein played the violin?
Wow.
It's probably just like a hobby for him, but there's this great photo of him playing the violin. I'm like, yeah, man.
That's awesome.
Guy basically wrote the rules of of modern physics and played a little Bach on the side.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Speaking of music, your first song choice for us today is Many Lifetimes. Tell me a bit about the song.
Many Lifetimes. It's the name of a song that I wrote, must have been before 2012, because there's a video of me playing it on the roof of the apartment building that I lived in Seoul, in Korea, almost 10 years ago now. But I only managed to finish recording it and all that in this last year, and with your help, finished mixing and mastering it. And it's a song that I feel has some depth because it's about reincarnation. It's about the possibility of the reiteration of a personality or a soul or whatever. And I'm not a firm believer in anything really. I'm open to everything, but I just like the poetry of it, the song, and the idea of just I don't know. So yeah, I would like to actually just read out the lyrics to the song before we play it because I'm quite keen to share them. So here we go. So Many Lifetimes by Pravda. I am scared of the future. I am worried by the past. I have plunged into the snowmelt of this mental avalanche. I am shaken by that bully fear. He grabs me by the scruff. I have waited all eternity. I have waited long enough. I have wondered many lifetimes, always trying to believe that the more you give, the more you receive. Deep breath.
Nice one. Shall we give that a listen?
Cool, yeah.
Mental avalanche, and I am shaken by Tune in for change.
Welcome back to KindaCreative here on Kinda Sound Radio. This show will be uploaded as a podcast on Thursday and also as a video to my YouTube channel, which is Djangoza on YouTube. Question for you. Where do you see the music industry in, say, 5 years? Where do you sort of see things going at the moment?
Well, the short answer there is a more direct connection between artists and fans. At the moment, there is a chain of, you could call them intermediaries, which have had their use in the past in terms of publishing and distribution and marketing and all of that. But most of those tools are now in the hands of the creatives themselves. And I think it's just slowly, or actually quite quickly dissolving the monoliths that have been controlling, the way that music is heard are becoming less and less useful, more obsolete. So, for example, 2 days ago, I read for the first time that the DJ track download store Beatport is going to be accepting Bitcoin as an official payment from June.
Wow.
I'm not a cryptocurrency aficionado. I see the writing on the wall here. Gumroad, which is my chosen e-commerce platform, it's kind of like Bandcamp for all things merch, workshops, ebooks. They've started inquiring about, the use of Bitcoin to their users. So some of these things that I was researching 2-3 years ago, which is that I'm seeing them come to pass. The topic that I was looking into in 2017 or so was blockchain as a tool for kind of unlocking the music industry, which is really still very old-fashioned and rigidly controlled and a little bit, I don't know. I'm reluctant to say underhanded because I don't have any facts, but there certainly are people who prey on young artists in the music industry. Part of what I'm trying to do is raise the overall level of knowledge and really empower the artists themselves to make these direct connections with their fans rather than relying on the gatekeepers and, seeing, for example, getting on a Spotify playlist as a viable source of revenue and one that's going to prop up their career in the long term. That's simply not the truth. So I'm trying to research these things myself to provide alternatives to the current method of how people listen to music and all that. Basically just make it easier and better and more lucrative for the artists themselves. That's my mission.
Yeah. So, personally, I'm curious as to where it all goes, but the way I see it, it bothers me when people complain about the system as it is, but very few seem to be really putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And for example, Spotify, if all our favorite artists weren't on Spotify, what value would it have to us? The convenience value would be gone because our favorite artists aren't there. So if people complain, if they actually do something about it and not support these platforms, that is a much more effective way to go about it, in my opinion. It's just, obviously, it's a tough one because you want to be where your listeners are, but they're only there. It goes both ways. So I don't know. It's a tricky one. I've been trying to reconcile that myself with an EP that I released as to where to sort of put it. And at the moment, it's just on SoundCloud, Bandcamp, where Bandcamp obviously cuts out the middleman and I sort of can get paid directly. And my main reason for even charging for the EP was because I have contributors who I feel are valuable. Musicians, like their contribution has value, and I'd like them to be compensated. So there's Bandcamp, and then I've also put it up on Audius, which is just sort of free quality streaming service, but it's also built on blockchain technology, I believe. They have a currency called Audio, and I've heard of them giving this currency to, I think it might be like their top 10 artists, most played artists of a month or something. I'm not too sure of the details. It's varied. I need to read all their documents, but I mean, you did some research on platforms like that.
Yeah.
Have you any insights into that whole scene?
Sure. Well, yeah. So a broad overview of how blockchain is changing many industries, and the music industry being a ripe target for one, seeing as it's so tied up in red tape. and copyright infringement, all these YouTube takedown notices. These are problems for culture. They're roadblocks. A lot of them are perceived to be unnecessary by the groundswell of independent producing artists like me in this tiny little bedroom. I'm able to put out songs that are, almost competing on the same level of, audio quality as anything you might find in a chart. So what we found is the barrier to entry has been lowered. There's an absolute upswell of people who are now able to produce the content, but they're hitting these roadblocks. Now, so how does blockchain solve this? What is blockchain? Blockchain is just basically a decentralized storage system. And what that means is artists don't actually have to submit their music to a record label anymore. In fact, since before blockchain, we've been able to directly publish music using platforms like SoundCloud and Bandcamp, and now even YouTube, which is the world's largest music streaming service. So how it empowers artists is that blockchain makes clever use of smart contract technology, which basically means once the parties involved in producing a musical work have pre-agreed, prior to the release, have agreed on the percentage splits of any potential download revenue, so streaming revenue, that agreement is unchangeable. So it bypasses a lot of the legalities when we put our faith into this, into blockchain, which is a type of, the cryptocurrencies of blockchain are a type of, it's a type of trust, in the same way that we trust that the government will give us, $10 worth of value when we give them this paper bill. Cryptocurrency has the potential to deliver that same level of security and trust once there's enough of an uptake, enough of an adoption about it. Okay, so let's just put a pin in that for now. So the ideal, to answer your question, in 5 years' time, there are going to be more artists. For example, you and I have worked on music together. We say before the time, all right, we've done 50-50 on this track. We're going to put it in a smart contract and we're going to upload it to the music streaming service of our choice. The music streaming service might be a blockchain-powered service. For example, you mentioned Audius. That's cool. There are others. So there was one called Feedbands a while ago. There was one called Tune. There's a whole list of these things. And how it works is that when someone comes along to one of these platforms, which is like a Spotify, but it's like a crypto version of Spotify, then they play the song and that generates a little bit of revenue because their attention is monetized. The platform benefits from their attention. And that money gets split according to the smart contract. So then you get 50% and I get 50%. And that's basically how it works. The platform itself doesn't even really need to take much of a cut. The cryptocurrency itself takes almost nothing. There's a small fee called gas, but the fees are way lower than the typical type of payouts. Like, for example, PayPal does a 3% transaction fee, roughly 3%. Which isn't a lot, but it's still $3 out of a $100 paycheck. And if you scale that up, and you have to start to question the amount of value that fiat currency and digital download transactions are offering in the face of this new alternative called blockchain-based music streaming services. So yeah, there's a whole lot to unpack. And the second I start to talk like this, it tends to go over everyone's head, and it goes over my head, and I don't know what's going to happen. But the important thing, the headline here is, there is an alternative to the way things have been, and now that we're starting to exit the really early adoption phase. Bitcoin only started 11 years ago, and we're starting to see options for paying in Bitcoin, hitting these rather major retail stores and not, retail outlets, and Venmo is pretty big in the States. I'm just excited about the possibility of making a tune on Thursday, uploading it on Friday, getting paid on Saturday. I don't think that that's too much to ask in the age that we live in.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who's creating their own original work needs to look at appeasing any kind of intermediary anymore between them and their fan. Their fan is their patron. Their fan is the one that represents, in a very tangible way, the value that an artist has to society. The fan is the living, breathing output of that artist's input. And we have to really start to think of anything that disrupts this relationship or dilutes this relationship as potentially destructive to the value of art in society. We have to start to think of, like I was mentioning earlier, play. Play is therapy. Play, we're in a stage now where every second marketing message contains something about well-being, about wellness, mindfulness. These are the messages that are being used to gain new customers because people are starting to become aware of the value of play. The next step would be to start measuring it. It's not really being measured. Like, there's a lot that's not being measured, which is why capitalism has spun out of control, because the only thing that's been measured is that high number. We have to start to measure the value of art in society, the value of wellness in society. These need to become entries in our ledgers. You see, actual monetization of play. This is something we have to start to think like this. Cryptocurrency, blockchain, good ways to enable this. But mostly it comes down to the individual's ability or willingness to sit and think and make up their own decisions about things rather than just following the most convenient option.
Yeah. It is an interesting one, and I hope, kind of going back to the question about where we see the industry in a few years, I'm hoping that people are becoming aware of artisans again, and they're becoming aware of the value of small-scale production and its benefits to the environment over a huge monoculture farming environment. The same goes, fishing, these fishing vessels. I don't know if you've seen Seaspiracy. Everyone's been talking about it lately. I know a couple of people who've just stopped eating fish as soon as they saw it. So, there's a lot of awareness around that sort of thing. And I think, and also in the UK, apparently they're going back to, some people get their milk from a milkman in a glass bottle, and you stick it outside, and that system of somewhat recycling and craftsmen and that sort of thing being appreciated. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, there's going to be a renewed appreciation for real instruments, real craftsmen, real musicianship, and therefore also supporting them. People are aware in certain counterculture spheres, people get kicked off social media, and the culture around them is to support them monetarily because they know that they can't just rely on an algorithm to boost them, So I'm hoping the same is true of music soon, that people start to realize that they need to not just go with what's convenient. It's sort of the same thing applies. If you see where I'm going with that point.
Absolutely. But you've also got to look at the role that, just status and hegemony play. And by that I mean, we make decisions as people, whether it's music or food or whatever. We make decisions around the perceived status that the outcome brings. You're having a dinner party, you take out the fancy silverware. There's no actual additional functional value. It's not like the silverware is a lot sharper than the regular stuff. The knives aren't a lot sharper. But it's just because that's how we are. So I've spent most of my life boldly rallying against the status quo, but I realize that it's a fool's errand. And what I have to do, instead of trying to change behavior around, how following the herd makes you fit in the status quo, I have to actually just put into practice in my own life what it might look like if you, instead of just only ever clicking the top link on Google or following the most convenient source of your music, food, art, clothing, to actually just look a little bit further and to drive one extra suburb to get your blueberries, or to go to one extra shop to get your clothing because there's a place around the corner that's small scale and does it a bit more cheaply. These are not things that really win you points around the dinner table yet. They are in my circle because I would consider the culture that I'm a part of is a lot more people aspire to it than don't, because it's perceived as luxurious on a global scale. I'm probably within the 10% most wealthy type of situation. I'm a white South African. We had it really, really good in terms of global living standards for over half a decade, and I'm the beneficiary of that. And I got born into that. I won the lottery, But I also see it a little bit as my, I see bigger than that. It's not just, so there are people who are upward socially mobile people who aspire to the type of life that I have personally. And I just don't think it's justifiable for me myself to ignore that entire segment of humanity in my own efforts to climb upward and upward and upward. So I'm looking for status in different ways. I'm not looking for status by having more fancy silverware. I think that's always going to be the case. But what I'm hoping for is a sort of trickle-down effect so that I can, in some small way, influence people around me and get them to think, get us to all think about the decisions that we're making, mostly which are indecisions, because it's simply a matter of following the status quo, but actually to look at the impacts that your attention has and what you pay attention to. What you pay attention to becomes reinforced. It expands, it grows. So, and it's as simple as when you're on your phone, scrolling a feed like this compulsively, every time you skip a post, you're making a decision. Every time you stop on a post and the little video automatically starts playing for you, you're making a decision. Every time you decide to pick up your phone and engage with this very, very useful and addictive tool, and instead of putting it down and perhaps considering something more meaningful in your life, every time we do this, so it's a treadmill. It's a constant treadmill. It's a constant treadmill, being somebody who looks at and evaluates the decisions in their life. And it's something that I would recommend if it resonates with you, if it's a life that resonates with you, if you want to be more conscious, if you want to be more aware of who it is you are and what it is you're offering to the world, you're not going to find it anywhere else. You're not going to find it in a blog post. You're not going to find it by looking elsewhere for that. You're going to find it by acknowledging the contents of your mind. And the people that I respect most in the world today, and the masters of the past, are people who have all taken responsibility for the contents of their minds. And this is already deep and everything. I know it's like really philosophical, but I think if we're looking, it's to be the change you want to see. It's as simple as that. You have to actually go to the event that's happening in the township, even though it's a little bit scary. It's part of bridging these divides. In Cape Town, we are so divided racially, economically. There are roads and rivers that carve up the city into areas, and it's, to me, I'm a culprit of it, and I'm a beneficiary of it, and I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like the unconscious patterns with which I fail to grow at times, and part of my practice as a person is to overcome that. And some days I succeed, and some days I fail. But to me, it isn't much more important than important things than personal growth. And being a better person when you leave the world than when you came in. This is what we're here to do. This is why we're here. Your sense of satisfaction, especially when you get older, you look for things to fill the gaps that are left by the excitement and stimulus of your youth. And what I'm finding now is that I feel well prepared for the second half of my life. I feel like I've spent the first half of my life building principles and practices that are enabling me to bypass a lot of the points of middle age that, where people fall down. They start to identify too much with their health, and start to identify too much with their social status and their earnings. And these are totally normal things, but none of that really means too much to me now, because I'm on a different wavelength, man. Like, I know how crazy that sounds, but I'm an artist. I'm speaking on a daily level to this invisible realm from which I draw my inspiration. And it's because of this and people like that, these are the people that we look up to. These are the people whose voices we listen to. These are the people who stop us in our tracks when we're scrolling a feed These are people's names jump out of us, jump out of the feed when we're looking for a new podcast. Oh, that person, oh, that person, oh, that person. Who are these people? What makes them special? Some of them come from good backgrounds, and we look to them as, role models. Some of them overcome tremendous odds to get to the point where their voice is worth anything. Who are these people, and what are they doing differently? How can I be one of them? How can I grow my business by being one of them? Whatever your motivations are, you have to be so dedicated to something that can't be seen. There's something that's inside you. You have to be so dedicated to that in order to make the change that you want to see. You have to be so I don't know, just in love with the practice of life, to make the changes that you want to see. Take it or leave it.
Lovely. Your next song choice, Everybody's Doing Gin. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, okay. Great, yeah. Let me pull up the lyrics here. So I want to read the lyrics here. They're quite short. Okay, Everybody's Doing Gin. Earlier I mentioned the status quo, and this song is a kind of a comment on the status quo. In South Africa, for the last 2 years, we've had a gin kind of craze, which means that all the bars and restaurants have gin specials, and gin is in, and gin is on the cover of the magazines. And it prompted me to write this song about how we follow blindly. It's not a criticism. It's just kind of it's a perspective. It's just a perspective that I hold. Here are the lyrics. Everybody's doing gin by Pravda. Everybody's doing gin. You're yesterday's confetti if you're not in. Go with the flow. No questions, no suggestions. Stick to what we know. Everybody's doing gin. It's just an occupation. So how's that a sin? 40%. One for each direction you could have went. But this year, everybody's doing gin. I wish I had $1 or even a South African rand for every unsolicited offer to promote my brand. Even you don't really care for the number. Nobody really cares for the numbers and the price that it costs you to win. The race to the bottom of the bottle's on because everybody's doing gin. Then it kind of repeats.
Yeah.
Give it a listen. Yeah.
Cool.
For anyone who's not from South Africa, a South African rand, that's the currency here in South Africa. So it's like $1, but local.
And worth a lot less at the moment than $1. Alrighty, here we go. Pravda, Everybody's Doing Gin.
Well, everybody's doing gin. You're yesterday's confetti if you're not in. Just go with the flow. No questions, no suggestions. Stick to what we know. 'Cause everybody's doing gin. It's just an occupation, so how's that a sin? 40%. One for each direction you could have went. But this year, everybody's doing gin. Well, I wish I had $1 or even a South African rand for every unsolicited offer to promote my brand. 'Cause nobody really cares for the numbers, the price that it costs you to win. The race to the bottom of the bottle's on. 'Cause everybody's doing gin. Breaking it in. Closing the choke. Going for broke. Whoa,
Kinda Sound Radio, the station for a global community.
Welcome back to KindaCreative. We are chatting to John Bartmann of Pravda. John, your motivations. We were just discussing off air, sort of external versus internal motivations, and whether, I guess, people around you are influencing you mostly these days, or if it's sort of coming more from within.
Well, these days it's mostly from within, but that wasn't always the case. I used to be, I guess, much more. I think most young people are more attached to their reputation and their image than older people. So I've come on a journey. Right.
All good.
I've come on a bit of a journey from trying to make changes in my circumstances to trying to level up and buying into rockstar mythology to this point in my life where I realize, I look back and I go, I see. I was never gonna be a rock star. That card wasn't even in my tarot deck, So it's kind of like it's just acknowledging with a sort of sense of maturity and that frees you up. That gives you more purpose, So this is what you've asked now. Is it's the band, or you could call it the band, that the production outfit that I run, Pravda, which I've been running for the last 12 years now. So is to me, it's like I'm using it to break the mold, because it's a band, but it's not a band. What I'm trying to do is I'm using it as an outlet for this exact thing. This is what intrinsic motivation looks like. We're used to our musicians being hype machines because they have to be in order to comply with the needs of the industry and to fight for radio space and all that stuff. And I'm just looking at the way things are these days, and I'm like, I don't actually have to be a hit anymore. I don't have to, turn this into some kind of money machine where every 2 weeks I'm charting and every and there are bands like that, and that's the need that they fulfill in society. People want music that's accessible, on demand, quickly. But what I'm doing with Pravda is it reflects exactly that question you've asked. It reflects the journey that I've gone on from the external motivation and wanting to impress to now sort of where I'm like, the music is more refined, it's more lyrical, I put more time into it, and it means more to me personally. And you can hear that when you listen to it. You can hear that it's rough around the edges and handcrafted and human. And I try to avoid all kinds of automation when I produce it. And I find that this is, it's a lifestyle that is more appropriate to my age and more appropriate to where I am as a person. I want to not compromise on the work. I want the work to speak to people who are on the wavelength that I'm personally on. And more importantly, I want to connect those other people. I want to find the others. I want to find and know them by name. I want other people to know each other by name. I want the rallying cry to be something along the lines of what Pravda represents, which is integrity and indifference to the motivations of popularity and fame.
That reminds me of a little bit of a minimum viable audience.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You can probably tell me a quick summary of what that means.
Minimum viable audience is a phrase I think coined, I don't know who's by, doesn't matter. It's the idea, it's the concept, the idea, which is, in the past we had limited channels of distribution. We have only three types of TV channel, in the States, and they're only 24 hours in a day. All of that has changed now to, we have infinite channels. We've got YouTube, and there are no gatekeepers to publishing. So our entire attitude towards marketing, it's a phrase used in marketing. It's a type of marketing. Whereas instead of the industrial approach, which is mass production and broadcasting at the loudest possible volume, our approach can be bring the scale down. And as we scale down, the quality of what we're doing goes up per person. So rather than trying to gain someone's attention by shouting louder than the competition, you gain someone's attention because someone they knew told them about what you're doing. they shared it because it means something, right? So there's a difference here. The one is standing on top of an ivory tower, shouting down at people with a megaphone and hoping that some ears hear what you do. You could call that the mating strategy of a fish, kind of spray and pray approach, right? Whereas minimum viable audience is more like the mating strategy of an elephant, which is one carefully conceived and product which gestates for a long time and is worth a lot to the artist, and it's worth a lot to the small community in which it operates. It's like the birth of a new elephant in a tribe. Everyone's going to protect that. Everyone's going to rally around it. I know the mating example is a bit weird, but hey, I'm a South African, man. We think in terms of wildlife. The point is here, there is a column on the spreadsheet that's not being measured, which is, you might call it loyalty or integrity or personal, the personal satisfaction that someone gets from something, the depth of personal satisfaction. These are factors that are not being measured. And so they're not working their way into any kind of marketing strategy. Whereas now that we have the ability to speak to people directly across the planet in real time, with 3 billion active internet users, we're ignoring a large part of the potential market by simply shouting the loudest at the top surface level. What we need to do is to trade in some of that amplitude for frequency in sound terms. What we need to do is to speak with more depth to fewer people, make more of an impact, because the implications of that is that those people share your work. Those people become ambassadors of your work. Those people identify with whatever kind of tribe you're trying to build, which is based on values that are deeper than simply raise my top line or raise my highest number.
Yeah.
Make me rich is not something that is not a message that people forward. People are people. People are human. We have our own value systems. And the people that are going to win with marketing in the long term, in the future, are those who make it very clear what their value systems are and tie that into their product. So hand-grown coffee, music that takes time to produce instead of just loading some kind of JavaScript, some automation script in order to pump out, There's the factory approach, and then there's the handcrafted approach. If the handcrafted approach comes bundled with something that people can resonate with, they will share it with you, and your work will develop meaning in a small tribe of people. And that tribe of people is called the minimum viable audience.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, that's definitely, I think, an important sort of strategy as people go forward, rather than, as you say, there's the sort of, I always associate Twitter with the shouting out at this wide audience. And it's sort of, you can either take the sort of shallow approach and try and just get as many sort of people interested as possible. And it's more of a short-term thing. Whereas if you get people truly invested in what you do, it'll be less people, but it will be a much more meaningful audience.
It might be less people, but it might be only less people in the short run. I find now what happens is people get hold of me for something I did 2 years ago, and they go, hey, this is great. And people get out of the blue. Like this one album of mine, so I produced royalty-free kind of library music for YouTubers. I release a new album a month free. I put the MP3s out for $0. Getting quite good downloads now, into the sort of hundreds a month.
Nice.
And I find people emailing me, go, hey, this is fantastic. This is amazing. I did this stuff 2-3 years ago. So why is it that something I did 2-3 years ago, is there anyone scrolling to the bottom of your Twitter feed and finding what you were doing 2-3 years ago if your approach is simply shouting? No. The reason that it spreads and shares is because it thrills the people on the ground who hear it. It has a shelf life. Artists, I'm speaking to you now, don't just completely ignore how many plays your work gets for now. What's not important is how many plays it gets in the short-term initial hype cycle. That's just an upswell in the volume of your graph. What you should be thinking about is getting your work online, getting it to the audience, getting it to the potential audience, 3 billion people. You might well find that in the long term, the volume of your graph is actually greater. If you took it over a 20-year period, the number of people that got hooked in the short term and then forgot about it is far fewer than the number of people who slowly over time shared and uptook your work. And if you're looking for some kind of career in the arts, and digital is the platforms that you're looking at are digital, then you should certainly be thinking about getting your stuff online, whether it's finished, perfect or not. You don't get to decide the value that it has to other people. I'm surprised sometimes when I look at some of the stuff that I hastily did. I thought, this isn't going to go anywhere. You put it online, and next thing you know, someone downloads it or makes a donation to you. Like, to keep things on that level, I think it's the reason you feel ignored in the short term. And trust me, I feel ignored. Like, every day of my life, I feel like, why am I doing this? What is the point of this? So-and-so gets so many plays. Comparing yourself to others, don't do that. Think about 20 years from now and whether or not you still want to be doing what you're doing now. And if you're not, change the direction of your ship, course correct on the way. Just for goodness sake, just make sure you're running in some direction. Upskill. Learn how. So the e-commerce platform that I can recommend is Gumroad. Go and look at Gumroad, Gumroad.com. It's a creator-friendly e-commerce sort of store. The majority of what they sell is ebooks and workshops, so video content. So if you're some kind of, if you are, for example, someone who's really good at pencil sketching, or you want to be really good at pencil sketching, do what I've done. Start doing a pencil sketch a day or 2 a week and start putting it online for $1 or for free, whatever your model is, and start to do that and get hundreds and hundreds of products online. Get YouTube videos. You can use my music if you want. Go and download it, put it with the video, and forget how few people are listening to it and forget how few people are engaging with it, because I promise you, at some point, someone's going to come along and say, this is fantastic. Why has no one heard of you? And that person that comes along, they're the person that's sick and tired of having automated, algorithmic crap shoved down their throats day after day after day, that they're actually scrolling down the feed and they're looking for something a little bit more meaningful, which is usually not at the top. That's where you come in. So think medium to long term. That's my short advice for you. Think medium to long term. If you're a digital creator now, it's still early. Get your stuff online. Be brave. Come on, be brave.
Lovely.
Do it. Do it every day.
I'd also like to reiterate what you said there about, because I was hearing this somewhere else recently, or perhaps bringing it up to someone who was reluctant to put their music online. And it was, you said, it's almost not up to us how other people perceive our work. Well, it isn't. I mean, we can have our say about what we think, but really it's in the eye of the beholder. And it's almost, I've started to see it as almost selfish to not put out my work, because then it's just for me. And well, sure, there's value in having things just for you, but you have no idea the impact that it could potentially have if you don't actually put it out there. You won't know until you try, basically. And
totally.
And it's, as you say, it's. I mean, my other thing is just, in this digital age, things can get lost to the sands of time. You know, I could pass away and have hundreds of songs that never got out, and it had an impact on me watching a short sort of YouTube documentary about this music maker. I believe his name was Saki Kaskus, who was a Canadian sort of game soundtrack producer. And he was working on an album when he passed away, and basically friends of his in the industry finished it sort of for him posthumously. And it just sort of, I was like, wow, you know, how many musicians aren't going to have that done for them, you know? It just made an impact on me that, you know, it's important to get your stuff out there, even if you don't have like a solid marketing game plan, you know, just get it out there.
And besides the actual, I mean, look what's happening now. You're telling me about the name of someone and you're sharing it with me because that story and what it represents thrills you. So now I go look it up and I start to represent it. I scroll down the feed and I look for that which is underrepresented. It's the Moneyball approach. You shouldn't be trying to buy the top players just because they got the biggest price tag. You should be looking for those which are undervalued. And this is something that all the music industry, A&R people, and they look for that which can just very quickly and with very minimal effort be turned into something potentially to have its true value represented. You've shared with me a relatively unknown story now. That's something that most of us don't do. What we share is photos of our kids and pets on WhatsApp, funny videos, and maybe Spotify playlists. But how many listeners of a Spotify playlist called 100 Great Party Hits for Friday Night or whatever how many people actually know the artists, on that list? They're not following the artists. The artists are the byproduct. What they're following is the playlist, the curator, or even more broadly, Spotify itself. So as artists, we have to get the Spotify playlist creators out of the way. We have to get Spotify itself out of the way. And we have to make that personal connection with the listener, so that the listener feels like, whoa, they're really on the inside of this community, this tribe, and they resonate with the values of that artist, rather than just needing something really convenient for the music to even be heard, I think you see where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
I think that convenience is killing culture. That's my message. It's not a negative message. What it means is that we are responsible for what we pay attention to. And if you are the type of person who likes to think of himself as someone who, supports the arts or whatever, it's not enough to just think about it. You have to actually put your friend's band on Facebook. You have to say, hey guys, my buddy's playing at a coffee shop this weekend. I know it lowers your status. Obviously it lowers your status because people think, oh, what's this dork posting this crap South African stuff for? That's how people think. Screw those people. We're not trying to fit in anymore. Weird is in, okay? I know that makes me sound like an odd job, but this is the age of the weird. This is the age where the fringes are going to have more and increasing value over time, and the mainstream is going to start to resemble something that you put your stuff there when it can't make it anywhere else. You put your stuff into the mainstream, and you look for a place in the mainstream when you aren't able to actually make real connections with people anymore. Yeah, which side of the fence do you want to be on? I'm quite clearly this nutcase on the one side of the fence, and if you don't resonate with anything that I'm saying, then what I'm saying isn't for you, and that's the point. We've got more messages than a dominant narrative nowadays.
Yeah.
Mass media, the radio stations with their limited bandwidth, these days are over. We now have unlimited bandwidth. What you look for, you find, right? Find the others. Find the people that really resonate with. And that's what I love about KindaSound. What KindaSound is doing is you're putting on the map more and more of this type of content. I hate that word, but you're putting more and more of this type of audio and radio show stuff out, which allows someone in Bulgaria, someone in Australia to listen in and go, this is so much better than a really sleek, well-polished, edited podcast or something like that. This is humans. This is real. This is meaningful. I want to be a part of it. This is the message and the currency of our age going forward.
That is something I
Be
have
inspired.
to constantly remind myself. I have an example of a vlogger that I used to watch. He would film his life at a racetrack. He was working on the side, and you would sort of see his camera angle of life basically. And I loved how it wasn't scripted, and he would just sort of, if people knew who he was, they might just come up and chat to him or whatever. And it was just, it was real. And then as he got bigger, he was able to hire a camera guy and up the production value. And I think everyone unanimously was put off by it, because that's not what we were there for. We actually liked it real and raw, and not a major slick production. So there's a huge pull towards that in all fields. And I think it's important that we remember that, especially South Africans, sometimes we strive for this perfectionist quality. It's almost like we're trying to prove something about ourselves versus the rest of the world versus America, and it's a silly game.
Dude. South Africans, I don't know, with my heritage, which is European, we've got a hell of an insecurity complex. And you see this when they book bands. They'll book like for example, the headline act at Rocking the Daisies, which is a music festival. It's one of the big music festivals here in Cape Town, was Eagle Eye Cherry, who had that one big hit, Save Tonight, in 2002 or something. And then they put this guy on 10 years later, long after his, excuse me, but it was a one-hit wonder career, long after it was over. But the fact is, it was a big name from overseas that probably wouldn't have attracted the crowds that he did in the States or even in Europe. But South Africans have a weakness for international touring acts. And it's because of the scale at which we operate, and for a bunch of different reasons, and it was a good show. I really enjoyed it. We had a great time.
That's awesome.
But we really need to I think South Africans need to look more local. And maybe it's not just South Africa. Maybe it's smaller communities that think of themselves as satellites to the European or the Western Eurocentric mothership. We've got to actually start to question that and go, okay, that's cool, that's fine. If I want the mainstream stuff, if I want the well-produced, top-ranking Game of Thrones quality TV, I'll get it from there. let's not let that be the only thing that we allow ourselves to appreciate. Last night I watched a 15-minute short film by David Lynch, which was, it was something that anyone could have done. I mean, it was a conversation with himself, but the other character he's talking to is a monkey and he's got his mouth moving. I don't even know what it's called. I mean, anyone who's put off by anything arty would immediately go, what is this crap? But I just like the fact that we have access to this crap now. We don't have to go and hunt for the abstract, the weird, the alternative. So we should be opening ourselves and we should be dialing back a little bit on the mainstream top-down type of content. And we should start looking a bit more laterally at like what our friends are doing and what people in our circle are doing. You know, this is the way it should be. But that's just my opinion.
Cool, man. Wrapping up. People can find you, obviously, johnbartmann.com. You've got, as you say, free music coming out, free albums every month. Of copyright-free music for YouTube, and they can get in touch with you for commissioned like music for podcasts and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, please do. I'm writing some more 90s music for a gaming channel this week coming up now. There's another guy he's actually a biggish actor. He's done like roles on HBO stuff. He's Tom Michelson. He's in contact with me about helping him build his sort of musical approach, which has got ukulele sounds because he's proudly Pacific Islander. And so I constantly do jobs like sort of in the $50 to $100 category for people who are building their channels, because the risk is all on them. And I want to try to mitigate that by doing like really high value work for what you're paying for. And then of course there's all the free stuff, which is literally the 300 songs on my 300 asset packs on my website. Not 300 asset packs, maybe about 10 asset packs, 300 tracks. Point is, I provide resources to people, musical resources that allow them to grow their channels at a relatively low risk. So if you're into something that sounds a little less like the mainstream or more human, live instruments, that kind of thing, a weird approach, then go check out my offbeat music at johnbartmann.com. John Bartmann, 2 N's, N at the end. Yeah, and then there's Pravda Official. I suppose this will all be in some kind of show notes, but Pravda Official, that's the name of the band. I publish blog posts in line with the type of conversation we've had now, support local, that kind of thing. And I also publish music, which you, Django, have also helped me with mixing and mastering in the past and composition. And there's a new album coming out this year at some point called Blue Sky Sprites that I'm finishing off. And then finally, there's a podcast, my own podcast, which does not feature my voice at all. I'm sure you'll be grateful to know at this stage. It's conversations with audio drama composers. So all these other people who write music for audio dramas, I edit their short interviews into these psychedelic sort of very colorful, rich listening experiences. So go check out How I Make Music in your podcast app or whatever, or go to howimakemusic.com and you can check out what that's about. Those are my 3 channels at the moment: johnbartmann.com, pravdaofficial.com, and howimakemusic.com.
Lovely. Thank you, John.
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah, it'd be great to have conversations with anyone who's resonating with this type of stuff.
Absolutely.
You can shoot me an email. Yeah, I love hearing from people on the level of kind of sound listenership.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that. Really enjoyed this chat.
Great.
I chose one last song to close the show. It is Shunt. What is the story behind Shunt?
Well, Shunt, it was a challenge that I've set for myself. So I play violin sort of amateurly. I recorded it about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a tango track. It sounds a bit like electro tango, like Gotan Project, that kind of thing. And the goal for me was to lay down a recording of the violin, which was the best I could do at the time. I'm 5 years better now, so you always cringe a bit when you hear your older stuff. But I like it. It's got a vibe to it, and it's an electronic song without too much of the repetition. So it sounds like something you might dance to at an exotic sort of maybe a flamenco-themed evening or something like that. That's Shunt. And then I recorded the accordion live. It was the first time I played accordion, actually. I borrowed one from a friend, and I got a nice, rich, lush sound. I love the accordion so much. I got that into the track too, yeah.
Yeah, man. I love how, in a way, it's a good thing when one's music is somewhat representative of what one's skills are at the time. You can cheat it slightly, but not so much, and it's much easier if you don't have to cheat it, like improving your voice to sing on your tracks or improving your violin skills, and it's like a snapshot in time of your skills, but it's also, I mean, I just like that track, always have. It was a huge honor for me at the time to work on it. I was sort of starstruck by that track. So yeah, here is
Cool,
Pravda John.